Alright, hi everyone. So, Sega asked me if I would be kind enough to review their newest Yakuza game for you, which is Yakuza 5, and being a big fan of this series, I said, yes I would. Okay, so I guess we should get straight on with this. Now, I should say right at the start, a copy was provided to me by Sega Europe, and there's something else that I should say. This review won't contain any spoilers for the game. I'm not going to be talking about any major plot points outside of the initial story setup. And I should also point out that reviewing video games isn't my job. I'm not paid to do this. I'm actually a full-time university student, so that means that the days of me sitting in front of a console for hours on end are well and truly over. So this game actually came out during the week when all my coursework and exams were coming up during the last week of semester. So as a result, I couldn't actually get onto it for a couple of days afterwards. And that means that I'm actually not very far into the game. At the moment, my in-game completion sits at around 13%. However, that's not through a lack of trying. In fact, at the moment, according to my in-game stats, I'm approximately 20 hours just over into the game in terms of how much I've put into there. Excuse me. And now, why am I not that far into it, even if I put 20 plus hours in there? The reason being is that the game has that much content in it. It will absolutely eat up your free time like there's no tomorrow. Aside from the main storyline being very long, however, it's also a very rewarding storyline. You're not going to get bored during it. It's very engaging, and it really draws you into it, and it's told very well. The actual game is stuffed so much of content, you can get distracted very easily and end up pumping hours into a side quest. Okay, so let's get on with it. I suppose we should actually talk about the extra content and some of the design here. The game has a number of different playable characters, and as you progress through the game, you'll switch to another one. If you've played Yakuza 4 or even Dead Souls, or Yakuza of the End as it's also known, you should be very familiar with this kind of setup. In Yakuza 5, you start off as Kaz, or Uncle Kaz as he's jokingly known, and you'd be mistaken for thinking that you're actually playing a taxi driver simulator game. Because when you start off, you actually are told go to your job. So you go to your job and you're introduced to a couple of characters, you sort of interact with them a little bit, and you're basically told go buy a gift for this guy. So you go out, and I thought, okay, this isn't a problem, I will go out and I will buy a gift for this random character. And as I'm walking through the streets, I'm sort of thinking, what the hell do I buy this guy? Because it hasn't actually told me what I should buy. So I'm going into the shops and I'm looking for stuff, and in the space of an hour and a half, this is what I did. I went into a convenience store, read all the magazines that were in there, browsed what they had for sale, and then I went down some of the streets, went to the restaurants, had some food, and I then went to the arcade that's in there. And I ended up staying in there for the best part of an hour, just playing all the arcade games and having a go on the claw machines. And after a while I thought, okay, I should really start looking for a gift now. And then I noticed that whilst playing the claw machines, I actually had prizes in my inventory. And as I left the arcade stall, my character actually said I should visit whoever and drop off their gift now. And it suddenly dawned on me, the prizes that I'd won in the arcade, I could actually give to this character, and it would progress the main storyline. That, to me, is fantastic games design. The item I actually had was a knight statue, from the game Knight. And to me, that was fantastic game design. It basically allows you to explore the city and get rewards from what seem like side quests or side events which aren't really part of the main game. And you can actually use those, and they have a direct impact in the main game. And I thought this was really good. The game basically left it up to me to decide what to buy for this guy. It wasn't a case of, oh, he might like this, or this, pick it, and then that will decide what reward you get. The whole city and all the items on for offer were items that I could have given him. Heck, if I wanted to, I could have bought a can of dog food and given it to the guy as a gift. I could have done anything. But I really liked that, the fact that on your way to the guy, you can pass the arcade, and if you go in it and get distracted, the prizes you win in there you can actually give this guy. And it doesn't end there with how the side quests, the extra content, and the design really complement each other. Another encounter is with a chef, and he's running some kind of TV show, and he wants to know about various restaurants. And from previous games, I was a bit, oh god, it's one of these side quests. What usually happens is, in previous games, you would run around the whole city, report back to the guy, and you might get some experience points or a random health boost or something. No, this was really different. This guy's rewards actually greatly benefited the main game. The first thing that happened is I got a second health bar, which radically improved my chances in boss fights and various other encounters. Then the second reward was some kind of stat enhancement. Basically, if you go eat at restaurants, you can build up some kind of basically, I don't want to call them abilities, but more like enhancements, which enhance your how you perform in combat. So this was a side quest which directly benefited the main storyline and basically improved it. But it was still a side quest. You know, you didn't have to do it if you didn't want to. And this I found was happening with a lot of various side quests in the game. They would give you rewards which weren't just like the odd one or two health items. They were actually changing the dynamic of the main game. And I really liked this. Because I suddenly became aware that as I was doing these side quests, I was exploring the city, doing more side quests, which were making it more familiar for the actual main part of the game, and it was really good. I've played games in the past where they tend to advertise themselves as having over, 40 hours of gameplay, or in some ridiculous cases, over 100 hours of gameplay. And you get into it, and you discover there's a main campaign mode, and all this extra time is pathetic filler content. For example, you go around the map finding collectibles. When you get them all, something unlocks, or there'll be something like paint your logo on a rival gang member's logo, or destroy all the rival factions' flags. You know, it's filler content. It's there, you do it, but, it's not that great or intuitive. Yakuza 5, however, does it right. The content has a direct and significant impact on the main game, but it's still optional content. You can still beat the main game without doing it. And it also gives you really good, impactful rewards, which directly benefit how you play in the main game. You don't need them, but they will dramatically change how you play it, and it will dramatically enhance how you play it as well. And aside from that, this extra content is very well made. And an example of this is very early on, you get the taxi driving game, and it's amazing. It really is really good. I honestly thought it would be kind of buggy, or I'd get bored of it really quickly. But I didn't. In fact, I almost wish they'd expanded on it a little bit more. How this works is it's split up into 3 different segments. There's one which is actually a very realistic taxi driving segment, in which you have to obey traffic lights and road signs and actually perform really well in order to keep your customer happy to get a better tip and more experience points. There's another section which is basically you have to chat to the customer, and depending on how well you do determines your tip and how many experience points you get after that. And there's other sections as well where there's actually like taxi driver racing, and these things were insane and they were really fun. However, I've got to admit, when I got to the last 2, I really did want these to be over, because it did drag on a little bit. And this entire side quest took me approximately 7 hours just to beat. It was that long, and there was that much stuff to do in it. And this was a side quest. And the arcade games as well. These are actual ports of real arcade games. There's Virtua Fighter 2 in there, which you can play as all the characters from the game. It's an actual in-game port you can play. There's also a Drum Master game in there too, which works very, very well. I think there's also an Outrun game, but I haven't yet managed to get to that arcade. The arcades have different games in them. And there's also a couple of other Yakuza staples as well. The karaoke is back, the fishing's back, darts and golf are back. But they're not just copy and pasted ports from the previous games. They've had enhancements. The darts game, for example, it's one of the most difficult games in Yakuza, if you ask me. And they've now allowed it so that you can customize your actual darts, which help make the game a lot easier and a lot more accessible. It feels when you're playing this and when you see all this extra content that these developers know exactly what they're doing. The content isn't just like slapped in there as to say, oh, hey, we've got all this extra stuff you can do. It actually, whilst it's optional, it feels very rewarding, and above all else, it's genuinely fun to play. Okay, so, ironically, we should probably move on to what the main game is like. The main game is absolutely fantastic. It hasn't changed too much from the previous installments, though I do have to ask, why should it? The previous installments have been very, very good. And while some people may say there's a risk of it becoming stale, it doesn't. Part of the reason for this is the different characters that you can unlock on the way. They have different gameplay styles, which help vary it up quite a lot. But aside from that, the fighting system is very satisfying, and the actual moveset is very huge. You'll probably end up defaulting to a certain combo, but the special moves that you can pull off and the finishers, there is a huge variety of that. And when it comes to counter moves and actually using different fighting stances to perform counters and reversals, you suddenly realise just how vast it actually is. Now, the story is very well written, and the CG sequences are absolutely incredible. I have to admit, I am wondering why the Yakuza devs are not given much more credit. The CG sequences are very well done. They very easily rival anything that Naughty Dog is putting out there. And in fact, I would probably argue that they should be up there with the top people that actually do really good CG sequences. They're very, very well made. It's almost like I'm watching I don't want to say I'm almost like watching a movie because it's such a cliche thing to say, but they are filmed very, very well. There's this thing in the field of acting where people say that I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's something like about 80% of the performance is done through body language and not the voice. Yeah, the Yakuza developer team very much understand this. The CG sequences, you don't really need the dialogue to understand what's going on. You could just watch it and you could understand. The level of emotion, facial expression variety that's going on in these is very well done, and it's also very subtle at times as well. You can tell when a character is just going to suddenly double-cross another one before he actually says the words, or pulls out that gun, or pulls out that knife. You can tell that they're planning something. And, the actual story itself is really good. I don't want to talk too much about it, because obviously I don't want to spoil it for anyone. But it does feel like it's a brilliant new series in some kind of long-running crime drama. You really do feel the tension, you really do feel the conspiracy, and you are drawn into it. One thing I will say, though, is that it can be easy to lose track of what's going on, because there are no English dubs in this. There's English subtitles, so if you get distracted, it's going to be very difficult to sort of figure out what's gone on. But that said, if you pay attention, you're in for one hell of a crime drama. It's really, really good. Okay, let's talk about the actual scope of the game. The game feels bigger. In fact, it feels bigger than Dead Souls and Yakuza 4 combined. And I'm not just talking about the extra content they've thrown in there. The size of the first city is enormous. It feels like there's so much to do and explore. Whilst it takes about a minute to run from one side of the city to the other, there's so much in that 1 minute of just exploring that you can go through it so many times and see new stuff. And as you progress through the game, like NPCs will be walking around doing something else, and there's a day in the game will shift from day to night and to sunset as well, and all this has an impact on what shops are open and what menus they're serving and other things which are going on there. and it's just so good. You'll be walking down the street and you'll be seeing rival gangs sat on the street just waiting for someone to come by, or you'll get chased by a host by the host of a club who thinks that you're going to try and rob him because he thinks you're an Yakuza member, or rival gangs will just walk around a corner and take you out. And this is kind of where I think it's a spiritual successor to Streets of Rage in many ways. It feels like you're actually there. You can see they can feel like they've taken influence from Streets of Rage with this game, and it does feel like if Streets of Rage had a 3D iteration, it would look something like Yakuza. It's really well done. Now, it isn't just fighting as well. There's also a section where you play as, I think it's pronounced as Haruka. It's the girl from the previous games. Now, everything about this should be terrible, but it's not. She's surprisingly good, and I wanted to check if other people felt the same way, and it seems that a lot of critics and gamers have been praising her section in the game as well. She's a teenage girl, and she's trying to become a pop star, so her gameplay involves around you dancing and singing, as well as other mini-games. In fact, there's one section where you're actually at a press event, and you have to meet and greet fans and do it so that the security guard doesn't pull them away if they get a bit too creepy. And it's... I don't want to dwell too much on it, but I think they've probably created a really good female character with this. And the relationship between her and Uncle Kaz as well is really interesting. You kind of see how Uncle Kaz is trying to step away from her, but he still cares about her because he doesn't want his past to ruin her career chances. And you can sort of see how a girl from of Haruka's age can really easily fall into the pop star and celebrity culture. So you do kind of sympathise with that. But her actual gameplay is really, really good. And I think people should really look at it and look at her as the character in the gameplay. And it's a great example as to how you can radically change what your game is advertising, but still maintain that interest and still show a really unique experience for the player. It's very impressive and it's really good. Okay, let's move on to the technical performance and graphics. Now, should we mention that this game came out in 2012 originally, but it feels so much better than previous games, and even some games which have come out after it. Compared to previous games, there's been a clear enhancement in how they're rendering the visual fidelity, both in-game and with pre-rendered cutscenes. It's really good. In fact, I'd say that in some parts it's better than what is on some current systems like PS4 and Xbox One. I was really surprised, especially the level of detail in the CG sequences and in the actual in-game cutscenes as well. They're really well done. And actually, technically from the game, there aren't any problems that I can see. I've not spotted any stuttering or slowdown. It's running at a constant frame rate. There's no obvious drops that I can see. But that said, there are one or two problems, which do take out the immersion for a bit. One thing is what I'm calling ghosting. Basically, early in the game, I was actually walking through the streets talking to another character, and he started talking about his past, and then all of a sudden, around all the characters, NPCs started to randomly appear and then vanish. Now, due to the dialogue that was going on at the moment, I actually thought it was a deliberate effect, like it was starting up a flashback sequence. And then the camera angle changed and I quickly realised it wasn't, and the game was actually having problems rendering NPCs during a cutscene. Okay, now, if you're actually just listening to this instead of actually watching the video, you might want to take a look now, because at one point the game did this. Yeah, this guy was in one of my taxi missions, and his name was Foreign Tourist. Now you might sort of notice there's a problem with his mouth. Yeah, for the entire taxi mission, the game decided he didn't need to have a mouth, just his teeth would be fine. And he was actually talking like that during the taxi missions as well. And yeah, I've not seen that happen again, but that was quite terrifying. Yeah, those are the only technical problems that I've seen so far. But otherwise it's fine, and I've not seen any other issues either. It's a very, very well made game by a very, very talented team. Okay, so in closing, I've sort of mentioned that this is a spiritual sequel to Streets of Rage, and yeah, I do stand by that. It does feel like what a 3D Streets of Rage game feels like. You walk through the streets, you stumble across a gang of thugs who will attempt to rob you, but overshadowing all of this is a crime network and conspiracy, which shows you just how insignificant these thugs are in the grand scale of things. And Yakuza 5 basically takes what made the original titles great. It refines it, it changes very little, and just expands it. It expands everything. The attention to detail, the scope, the detail in the cutscenes. It just took everything and turned it up to 11. It's really great. It genuinely is. And you can see the influences it's taken from movies and previous games. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to recommend any other crime-based game on any system, really, over this one. While some people will say, what about Grand Theft Auto 5? Yeah, Grand Theft Auto 5 is a great game. It's a great crime game. But let's be honest here. Grand Theft Auto 5 is what you would call the more comedy, less super serious game. You can have fun. You can have a laugh with that and fun. It doesn't take itself seriously at all, that game. Yakuza 5 does. And it's basically two. They're on the same curve but different sides to it. If you can understand that. Yakuza 5 is trying to be a serious game. However, that said, it's not really, because there are funny comedic moments in there, but they're done just to sort of break the tension and to sort of change the pace a little bit. But that said, if you really do like crime dramas, ones which are done to sort of make you feel the tension and feel like there is a conspiracy going on in there, I can't recommend Yakuza 5 enough. It's really great. If you own a PS3 and you want a system seller or you enjoy games which excel, I can't recommend Yakuza 5 enough. You should download it immediately. It's brilliant. Okay, I guess that's all I can say on this. Just that I knew Yakuza 5 would be good, or I expected it to be good, but I'm absolutely blown away with how much content there is in there and how good it actually is. I can't wait to get back to it and hopefully finish it off before the end of the year. Although I doubt that, because I can see myself pouring in hours and hours on this before I get near the end of the game. Okay guys, thanks very much for watching or listening, and hope to see you again next time. Goodbye.